There's a fear almost no parent admits out loud. It's not dying. It's dying and leaving behind a child who doesn't know how to move through life without help. A child who, once you're gone, is left exposed, without resilience, without judgment, without inner strength. If you're listening to this, you're probably already living it. You help more than you should. You step in to spare them from getting hurt. You solve things so they won't suffer. And at the same time, you feel the exhaustion of carrying problems that are no longer yours. The quiet wear of never being able to fully step back, of never getting a break from the role of savior. Today I want to talk to you about specific situations where helping a child doesn't make them stronger, it weakens them. These are hard, uncomfortable lessons, but necessary ones. I'm not speaking from books or theories. I'm speaking as a father, as a man who has already lost, who has already stayed silent, who understood some things too late. If you do nothing, you won't be the only one who pays the price. He will pay it when you're no longer here. 1. When they're looking for their first job and no one calls back, there's a kind of silence that shapes character, even if no one calls it that. It's the silence of the phone that doesn't ring after an interview, the email that never arrives. 1 week passes, then another. Your child comes home with their shoulders a little slumped, speaking in short sentences, trying not to show disappointment. And right there, at that exact moment, the parent feels a deep discomfort, a mix of guilt, urgency, and fear. The impulse is to step in, pull some strings, make a discreet call, push open a door that won't budge. Not because the child asks for it, but because it hurts the parent to see them waiting. But that silence isn't a punishment. It's a school. It's the first real encounter with a truth that can't be negotiated. The world doesn't owe anyone anything. That lesson doesn't sink in through the mind. It sinks in through the body, through waiting, through doubt, through trying again. That's where a child begins to discover whether they can stand on their own when no one validates them, when there's no applause and no quick answers. That's a vital muscle. If it's not used, it withers. When a parent steps in too soon, they're not solving a small problem. They're taking away the child's chance to be formed. The message that lingers isn't love, even if it's dressed up as help. The message is distrust. It's telling them, without words, that they're not enough, that they'll only get there if someone older pushes them along. That idea settles in slowly, but it stays, and later it can take years to undo. I've seen men my age already worn down, still carrying adult children who can't tolerate rejection. Every no dismantles them, every wait irritates them. They don't know how to review what they can improve, they don't know how to persist with dignity, they don't know how to adjust their effort. They weren't born that way. They were shaped that way, protected from every frustration, rescued too early. From a Stoic perspective, rejection doesn't define anyone. It's neither good nor bad in itself. It's a test. Marcus Aurelius understood this well. We don't control the world's response, but we do control our disposition toward it. Character is built right there, when there are no guarantees, when no one promises anything, when you still choose to get up and try again. If you truly want to help, your task is sober and difficult. Listen without correcting. Be present without directing. Ask what they learned, not tell them what they did wrong. Resist the urge to open doors they haven't yet pushed with their own hands, because self-respect is born when someone earns their place, not when it's handed to them out of pity or because of a last name. If they don't learn today how to endure not being called back, tomorrow they won't know how to endure a layoff, an injustice, or a more serious failure, and you won't always be there to cushion the blows. Letting them pass through that silence now is a harsh but honest form of love. What comes next touches an even more sensitive nerve and demands even greater restraint. 2. When they manage their own money for the first time. Money quickly reveals what words hide. When your child starts earning something of their own, even if it's not much, a quiet test appears. How they spend, where they make mistakes, what they put off, and what they rush to buy. And there again, the parent feels the temptation to correct, to cover, to save them from their own errors, because it hurts to see them come up short at the end of the month, because it's frustrating to watch them spend poorly, because one thinks that way they'll learn faster. And that's not true. Spending badly is part of the path. Running out of money too soon is too. Adjusting, giving things up, recalculating. All of that builds judgment. When a parent plugs the holes, the learning doesn't happen. The child doesn't feel the real weight of their decisions. They learn that there will always be a backup, an invisible net cushioning every excess. And that doesn't build responsibility, it builds dependence. I've seen older adults financially supporting children who should already be supporting themselves, not out of real necessity, but out of habit. Children who never learn to say no to an expense, to delay a desire, to live within their limits. And exhausted parents with tight retirement incomes carrying guilt that isn't theirs. Money isn't just a material resource, it's a strict teacher. It teaches consequence, it teaches patience, it teaches priority. In Stoic terms, it's an indifferent. It doesn't define anyone's worth, but it does reveal their inner order. Someone who can't govern a little won't know how to govern a lot, and that isn't learned through speeches, it's learned through direct experience. The right kind of help here is clear and limited. Set simple rules, don't cover avoidable mistakes, be available to talk, not to rescue. If they mess up, let them feel it. If they adjust, let them succeed on their own. The lesson hurts a little, but it strengthens a lot. Immediate comfort weakens in the long run. If they don't learn today how to manage their money, tomorrow they'll mismanage their time, their relationships, and their energy. Everything follows the same pattern, and you, if you don't draw this boundary, will carry worries that aren't yours at a stage of life where peace should weigh more than control. The next point touches an even deeper decision, one many parents try to direct and almost always pay dearly for. 3. When they choose a career or work path you don't approve of. There are few moments that strain the relationship between a parent and a child more than this one. Your child looks at you and tells you what they want to do with their life. And you, from your experience, from what you've already seen fail and what you've seen work, know that this path doesn't convince you. Not because you're stubborn, but because you've already walked roads they still idealize. That's when a quiet conflict appears between love and control. The common mistake is believing that stepping in here is protection, that bending their decision will spare them suffering. But there's an uncomfortable truth. Living someone else's path is more damaging than making your own mistakes. A child who chooses obedience in order not to disappoint, not to argue, not to break the image of the good child, doesn't become responsible. They become compliant. And compliance doesn't sustain an entire life. I've seen adults in their 40s or 50s with safe careers, but with a bitterness they can't quite name. They didn't fail for lack of ability, they failed for lack of ownership. They never felt that life was truly theirs. They fulfilled expectations, they responded, but they didn't decide. And that bill comes due late when there's no time or energy left to go back. From a Stoic perspective, no one can live for another. Epictetus was clear about this. Each person is responsible for how they use their judgment. If you make that decision for your child, you take away both their right and their burden to take responsibility. And without weight, there is no character. Without one's own mistakes, there is no deep learning. Supporting them here doesn't mean staying silent about everything or applauding anything at all. It means speaking with restraint, saying what you see, warning without imposing, laying out possible consequences without dramatizing, and then stepping back, letting them choose, letting them try, letting them know that if they're wrong, it was their decision, and that it's also their responsibility to correct it. If you can't tolerate your child making mistakes now, you'll end up tolerating something worse later, an adult who silently blames you for the life they didn't choose, and you'll carry a guilt that isn't yours either. Respecting their choice, even when it doesn't align with yours, is a demanding form of love. What comes next has nothing to do with external decisions, but with a pain no parent can or should prevent. 4. When they go through a breakup, there's a kind of pain that's hard for a parent to face head-on, even if they've lived through it more than once. It's a child's heartbreak, not because it's new, but because it awakens an old sense of helplessness. Your child suffers over someone who's no longer there or who chose to leave, and nothing you say can change that. That's when the temptation appears, to intervene, to minimize it, to rush the process, to try to close a wound that's still bleeding. Many parents believe that being supportive means easing the pain, that being present means distracting, advising, convincing them that they weren't worth it or that someone better will come along. But that rush to close the grieving process doesn't come from the child. It comes from the adult who can't tolerate watching someone suffer. The problem is that emotional pain can't be delegated. You either go through it or you drag it with you. There are no honorable shortcuts. A breakup is a real loss, and every loss demands its own inner time. If that time is avoided, the child doesn't mature emotionally. They learn to run from pain, not to hold it. They learn to look for replacements, not to sort through what they feel. And that flawed learning will follow them their entire life. In their relationships, in how they love, even in how they abandon themselves when something hurts. I've seen grown men and women who never learned how to be alone after a breakup. They can't stand the silence. They can't stand absence. They move from relationship to relationship with an anxiety that isn't love, it's fear. And that fear often has early roots, when someone unknowingly taught them that pain had to be covered up quickly. Seneca put it with brutal clarity: it's not that things wound us, it's that we refuse to accept them when they arrive. Stoicism doesn't propose avoiding pain, it proposes not adding useless drama to it. A breakup hurts, period. There's no cosmic injustice in that, there's human experience. And learning to move through it with dignity is one of the great lessons of adult life. The right kind of help here is quiet and steady. Be present without intruding. Listen without turning into a judge or a therapist. Don't speak badly of the other person just to momentarily soothe your child's wounded pride. Don't push them to get over what hasn't yet been understood. Sometimes the greatest help is not interfering with someone else's inner process. If today you prevent your child from suffering over love, tomorrow they'll avoid suffering over anything. And that won't make them strong, it will make them fragile. Because life doesn't stop hitting just because you don't want to look. Respecting their grief is respecting their capacity to grow. The next point isn't about emotions, but about collisions with the real world, and there, a parent's mistake is often even more visible. 5. When they have a serious conflict with an authority figure, there comes an uncomfortable moment in a parent's life when a child's problem is no longer internal, but external. A boss, a teacher, a supervisor, someone with real power who blocks them, disciplines them, or confronts them. The child comes home indignant, hurt, convinced they were treated unfairly, and as the parent listens, old things start boiling inside, the urge to call, to show up, to set the record straight, to restore order in the child's name. But that impulse, however understandable, is often a serious mistake, because the adult world doesn't negotiate with parents standing in the middle. And when a child learns that a higher authority will step in to resolve every conflict, they don't learn to stand up for themselves. They learn to escalate the problem. They learn that their own voice isn't enough. A conflict with an authority figure is a school of dignity. That's where you learn to speak firmly without being disrespectful, to hear criticism without falling apart, to tell the difference between a real injustice and a wounded ego. None of that is learned if the parent enters the scene as a permanent mediator. On the contrary, something essential is lost: independent judgment. I've seen painful situations. Older parents arguing with principals, managers, or supervisors over issues the child should have faced alone. The result is almost always the same. The child is infantilized, the authority stops seeing them as an adult, and the parent ends up exposed, drained, out of place. No one wins. Epictetus said it plainly: "We are not disturbed by things, but by the judgments we make about them." A conflict with authority doesn't define a child, but it does test them. It shows how much they control their impulses, how clear their position is, how willing they are to accept consequences. When a parent steals that test from them, they steal growth. The right kind of help here is to prepare them, not represent them. Listen to their version without assuming they're automatically right. Help them organize the facts, think through what to say, choose the right moment and tone, and then step back. Let them face it. Let them learn that respect isn't begged for, it's exercised. If they don't learn today how to handle conflict with authority, tomorrow they won't know how to handle frustration, hierarchy, or disagreement. They'll live either defensively or submissively. And you'll keep carrying tensions that are no longer yours. Teaching them to stand with dignity in front of another adult is one of the most valuable inheritances you can leave. The next point touches something even more concrete, where the temptation to correct is almost irresistible. 6. When they fail at a responsibility they accepted. There are failures that don't come from bad luck, but from a decision that was made and poorly sustained. Showing up late, missing a deadline, forgetting a commitment, losing an opportunity that was already there. When a child accepts a responsibility and then fails, the parent feels a hard-to-swallow mix: secondhand embarrassment, contained anger, and very often an urgent desire to fix what's already broken. That's when the most dangerous temptation appears, calling to explain, justifying them, asking for a second chance on their behalf, covering the mistake so it doesn't affect them as much. The problem is that when a parent corrects a child's mistake, they're not helping. They're teaching them that actions don't carry weight, that someone will always be there to carry the consequences for them. A responsibility that's accepted is a moral contract. No one forced the child to say yes, and when they fail, it hurts. But that pain is formative. It's what teaches them to measure their own capacity better, not to promise what they can't deliver, to respect other people's time and trust. If the parent removes that pain, they also remove the lesson. I've seen adults incapable of being reliable, not out of malice, but out of history. They never learned that failure has a real cost. Someone always came behind them to clean up the mess. And over the years, that person is often a tired parent, carrying burdens they should no longer be carrying, paying with their peace for someone else's mistakes. The Stoics were clear about this. Marcus Aurelius insisted on taking responsibility for one's own conduct without excuses. He wasn't talking about perfection, he was talking about responsibility. Failing isn't the serious part. What's serious is not owning the failure. And that ownership isn't learned if someone else steps in to erase the consequence. The right kind of help here is firm and restrained. Name the mistake without humiliating. Don't minimize it. Don't exaggerate it. Let the child face what comes next: a penalty, a loss, a distrust they'll have to rebuild. Support them with presence, not solutions. Character is formed when someone learns that their word carries weight. If they don't learn today that failure has consequences, tomorrow they won't learn how to be reliable in anything important. Not at work, not in a relationship, not even with themselves. And you'll keep carrying responsibilities that are no longer yours. The final point touches something even deeper, where many parents get trapped without realizing it. 7. When they feel lost and don't know what to do with their life, there's a sentence many children say quietly, almost with shame. I don't know what to do with my life. When that appears, the parent feels a particular kind of vertigo. It's not a concrete problem that can be fixed with a phone call or money. It's a fog. And fog is distressing, especially for someone who's already walked a long way and learned to navigate by experience. The most common mistake is filling that emptiness with quick answers, suggesting paths, pushing decisions, offering solutions to calm one's own anxiety more than the child's. But confusion isn't a system failure. It's part of growth. It's the moment when borrowed certainties are no longer enough and one's own haven't yet been born. Intervening too forcefully, there interrupts a necessary inner process. I've seen children who never learned how to be alone with their questions. Someone always thought for them. Someone always decided. And when that someone grew tired or was no longer there, the emptiness became unbearable. They didn't know how to listen to themselves. They didn't know how to wait. They didn't know how to distinguish between a passing desire and a deeper direction. Stoicism understands this point well. Epictetus spoke about learning to govern one's own judgment before trying to govern life itself. When someone is lost, they don't need immediate external instructions. They need silence, time, and friction with reality. That's where authentic direction is born, not from well-intentioned advice that only imposes order from the outside. The right kind of help here is uncomfortable because it demands patience, not answering everything, not filling every pause with words, asking questions that open reflection, not ones that close paths, allowing the child to make mistakes, to try, to discard. Clarity doesn't appear when it's forced. It appears when someone stays with doubt long enough without running from it. If today you can't tolerate your child being lost, tomorrow they won't tolerate being alone with themselves. They'll seek noise, external validation, other people's directions. And you, instead of enjoying a lighter later life, will remain the permanent compass for a life that isn't yours. Accepting their confusion is trusting that they can find their own north. The final point speaks to what happens when that boundary is never set and the child is already an adult. That's where the cost is usually high. 8. When your child is already an adult and still expects you to direct their life. This is the quietest point, and many times the most painful one. There are no open arguments or obvious crises, just an expectation hanging in the air. The child is already an adult, but still looks to the parent before deciding. They wait for approval, direction, constant backing. And the parent, almost without realizing it, keeps occupying a place that no longer belongs to them. At first it looks like love. Then it becomes habit, and later a burden, because directing the life of an adult child isn't guiding, it's intruding. And disappearing completely isn't the answer either. The mistake lies in confusing presence with control. The stoic role of the parent at this stage is not to command or rescue. It's to remain steady, available, and restrained without taking the helm of a ship that is no longer theirs. I've seen men my age worn out not in body, but in mind. Still solving other people's problems, giving opinions that weren't asked for, carrying consequences they didn't create. And I've also seen adult children comfortable in that dynamic, not out of malice, but because they were never required to fully assume their autonomy. It's a relationship that drains both sides. Marcus Aurelius spoke about accepting the role that belongs to each person at the right moment. Insisting on a role that has already fulfilled its function breaks the natural order. A parent who doesn't let go in time prevents the child from fully forming. And a child who doesn't assume adulthood prevents the parent from entering a lighter, more dignified later life. Supporting from this place requires a fine adjustment, listening without directing, giving opinions only when asked, being present without anticipating, holding clear boundaries without harshness. Example weighs more than any instruction. A parent who lives with order, temperance, and coherence leaves a moral reference far stronger than 1,000 pieces of advice. If this boundary is never set, the future is predictable. You'll carry decisions you didn't make, and they'll live an incomplete adulthood, always looking backward. Letting go is not abandonment, it's respect. And in an adult child's life, being respected as a reference rather than a director is the highest place a parent can occupy. Today we walk through concrete, real situations, the kind that don't show up in books, but do appear at the family table. The first job rejection, managing one's own money, choosing a direction, the pain of a breakup, a clash with authority, the weight of a failed responsibility, feeling lost in life. And finally, that quiet moment when the child is already an adult and the parent must learn to step aside without disappearing. They all share something in common. In none of them does the parent stop loving. What changes is the form. Helping less is not loving less, it's loving better. It's understanding that there are pains that shape, mistakes that teach, and silences that build character, and that always intervening, even when it comes from love, can leave the child more fragile and the parent more exhausted. The final lesson is simple and difficult at the same time. Ask yourself before helping, does what I'm about to do give them strength back or take it away? If the answer isn't clear, the wisest choice may be to wait. Courage at this stage of life often means not moving. I am Gabriel. This is the Stoic Garden. And the purpose of this space is to accompany you as you age with dignity, sovereignty, and inner peace. Not to make you feel better for a moment, but to make you stronger where it matters. If this message brought some order inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a child, a sibling, a friend, someone you truly care about. Sometimes a timely word is a quiet form of legacy. Thank you for staying until the end. We're still here, calmly, firmly, truthfully.